So through the grapevine, I have heard that people have had trouble with 11 and 13. So I'm going to do a quick video on those. The problem is talking about a rectangle, so draw it. You know the perimeter is 46. Right there, you should stop and write something else down. Don't you know the perimeter formula, right? So go ahead and write it down, 2L plus 2W. Okay? Then they tell you the area is 126. Ooh, there's something else I know a formula for, so let me write it down and set it equal to that number. Now, the reason we have two equations here is we're going to be able to do something called substitution that we learned about earlier in the year. When you have two equations, you usually use one equation to help get rid of a variable, and then you plug it in the other equation to solve it. So if you think about the length and the width, the book gives you a hint. It said, let W be the width. Well, if W is the width, how can I describe the length in terms of the width? That's what these equations are for. If you go back up here, you got 2L plus 2W is 46. Well, you can get rid of L by taking this equation and solving for it. Okay, so I'm going to solve for L. I'm going to subtract 2W. And that's going to be 2L is 46 minus 2W. And then if I want to get L by itself, I can divide everything by 2. And I get L is 23 minus W. Okay, so I can call the width W and I can call the length 23 minus W. How did that help me? I used this equation to get rid of one of the variables. Now I'll plug it in the other equation. Okay, so the area is 126. That's length times width. So my length is 23 minus W. My width is W. Let me get rid of this over here. Now, one thing might help your brain a little bit is when you have a number times parentheses, you can do it that way, but it might help a lot of you if you just rewrite it this way, because then your brain goes, oh, I need to distribute here. This is 23 minus W squared. Okay. Now, do you remember that when we will solve things, we need a 0 on one side? It doesn't matter really what side I get it on. So let's just say that you were thinking, oh, I'll just move the 126 over, because you know, that's just what your brain thought to do. Okay? So when you do that, you get 0 equal, I'm going to put it in order, negative W squared. Remember that negative's got to go with it. This was supposed to be a W here. Plus 23W minus 126. Except we don't like to factor with a negative, so how do I deal with that? How I deal with it is that I can multiply both sides or divide both sides by -1. I like multiplying better, so that's what I'm going to do. And if you remember, when you multiply by -1, it just switches the signs on everything. You can see it if you do the math and actually think negative times a negative is a positive, negative times a positive is a negative, and negative times a negative is a positive. Okay. Now this becomes something we can factor. I can say what multiplies to give me 126 and adds to give me 23, negative 23, and this is one of those ones where you might want to go to the calculator if you don't know the factors of 126, or you could use a factor tree and figure it out. The numbers end up being negative 9 and negative 14. So it's W minus 9, W minus 14. That means your width could be 9 or your width could be 14. If you were to plug the width in up here to try to find out what the length would be that would go with it, remember if the width is 9, the length's going to be this 23 minus W. 23 minus 9 would be 14 if I plug it in. I'm just going to show it here so I don't have to start a new screen and redraw stuff. If I plugged in 14 for the length, up here, 23, the length would be 23 minus 14. That's going to be 9. Either way, do you see that your dimensions are going to be 9 by 14? And you can just say the dimensions are 9 by 14. Okay, so for number 13, they say the sum of two numbers is 25, so maybe I write x plus y is 25. And then it says the sum of their squares, so if I square each number and add them, I get 313. Okay, well, I can't solve those equations because there's too many unknowns, but what I can do is go to the very simplest equation, which is this one right here, and say, let's get rid of one of the variables. Let's say I get rid of y. Okay, so I'm going to solve for y. I'm going to move the x to the other side, and I'm going to get y equal 25 minus x. So I'm going to come over here and say, oh, well, what I can do is now use that idea of substitution, which we talked about earlier this year. X squared plus 25 minus x squared is equal to 313. So I would have to multiply this out. Remember, this is 2 copies of 25 minus x multiplied together. It's not just square the 25, square the x. So if you multiply that out, you get 625 minus 25x minus another 25x. And then I know that that's equal to 313, but remember, I need to get all my numbers on one side, so I'm going to move this 313 over to this other side next. Actually, let me clean this up. This is x squared plus 625 minus 50x. And now let me go ahead and subtract 313 from both sides. Okay. Now I got to be careful here because I think I have lost a term. When I multiplied this out, I forgot to write that last minus x times minus x is plus x squared. I just forgot it. So this is actually, when I combine those two x squareds together, because we had this x squared and then we're going to get an x squared when we multiply that, I forgot to write out. Actually, it's 2x squared plus 625 minus 50x minus 313. So if we clean that up, if you subtract 313 here, that's going to be 312. So we're going to have 2x squared minus 50x plus 312 is equal to 0. Okay, so how do I factor that? Remember, when I'm factoring, the first thing I always check for is the GCF. So there's a 2 that'll divide out of all those. That makes it x squared minus 25x plus 156 equals 0. And so we got to factor it. And this is one of those where going to the calculator might help you. I'll try to do it without the calculator. I may have to turn the thing off because it may take me a while. 2 goes in there 7 times 14. 78, is that right? Yeah. And then 2 goes into there 39 times. And then 3 and 13. And if you try to figure this out, trying to add up to 25 here, how can we get that? That would be 39 and 4 won't work. Let me turn the calculator off and play with this and figure it out. You could go to the calculator at this. I think 12 and 13 work. And again, what I'm thinking is what multiplies to give me 156 and adds to give me negative 25, okay? So I was thinking this in my head. X minus 12, x minus 13. That means if I want to solve it, I set each of these two factors equal to 0, this one and this one. And when I do set those equal to 0, x minus 12 equals 0 would give me the answer x equal 12. X minus 13 equals 0 would give me the answer x equal 13. What are my two numbers? These are my two numbers. 12 squared plus 13 squared would be 313. 12 plus 13 is 25, and you're done.